Hi there! Today I am reviewing Afrika 2nd edition, part of the Standard Combat series by MMP. This is a game that I've been playing in the last 10 days or so because I played the campaign game, which is pretty lengthy and it portrays the entire North African campaign in World War II. It took me, I don't know, say maybe 2 hours per day for somewhere between a week and 10 days. Definitely a lengthy campaign, a lengthy scenario, but the game also includes much shorter scenarios. Today, first I want to show you the map in all of its glory. I played it here vertically on a piece of metal that I installed on my wall in my home office, and I used magnetic counter holders to hold the counters there. Also, I want to give you a general sense, a general view of the map before then I show you the map up close to talk about some specific mechanics of this game. I will not talk about the general system behind the game, the general standard combat system, because I already made a video about that. Before we start with the review, I also want to give a little bit of an after-action report to tell you how my campaign went. Well, the campaign really covers everything, covers the entire North African campaign from September 1940 to December 1942. At the beginning of the game, only the Italians and units of the Commonwealth are on the map, and from turn 2 to turn 5, the player controlling the axis has a restriction, that is, a certain amount, a minimum amount of Italian units need to be east of this line, the Mussolini line. This is to simulate Mussolini requirement that the Italian units would attack and go towards the east. And yes, the game starts with the Italian invasion into Egypt. The Commonwealth soon starts pushing back, and at that point, of course, the Italians find themselves in trouble. In February 1941, Rommel and the Germans are scheduled to enter the game and to start, well, lending a hand to the Italians, but then of course pretty much taking over the main action of the campaign. The units of the Commonwealth enter the game from this area here, Alexandria. The units of the Axis from Tripoli, which is here in this box here. And actually it is tricky because the box is not even really here. That is, there's a box here, then it costs 5 movement points to move from that box to this other box in the middle of nowhere, and then 5 more movement points to move from that box to the western edge of the map. That is, Tripoli is not even exactly here, it is farther, it is even farther than here, it is out of the map, strictly speaking. Now, as I said, the Commonwealth starts attacking the Italians that at the point are just forced to defend here by the line, trying to retreat as much as they can, as much as Mussolini allows them. And of course there is a restriction in terms of game rules. If you, the Axis player, do not have a minimum amount of Italian units east of that line, you lose the game. Then the game will get to control of key locations. Victory in the game is based on control of cities on the map at the end of the game. And an important city is Bardia, which is here. Historically, Bardia was lost in January 1941 by the Italians. In my campaign, the Italians did a little better, actually they did quite better, because they lost Bardia only in March 1941. Probably because at the beginning of the game I didn't use the Commonwealth units as aggressively as I could have. I didn't use all the possibilities that the exploitation phase was giving me. I realized that in retrospect. The fact that the Italians were able to hold Bardia until March is pretty important, because Rommel enters the game in February and he enters from the western edge of the map, from the Tripoli area. And since the Italians were still holding this line here, creating a good defense at Al Faya Pass and around Al Faya Pass and Solon, Well, thanks to this, actually, the Germans were able to get into Tobruk and to occupy Tobruk before the Commonwealth was there. So differently from what happened historically, the Germans were able to retain control of Tobruk in 1941. Then what happened is that pretty much the two sides came to a stalemate in the area between Tobruk and Bardia, the Commonwealth controlling Bardia, the Axis controlling Tobruk, and the fight mainly going on in this area, with both sides pouring troops in for months and months and months, with a front that would be moving in one direction and the other and change shape, but pretty much remaining concentrated in this area. As I say like this seems pretty unexciting, because you think, well, that's just attrition and just people punching each other's line and trying to punch a hole in the line of the opponent and not much happening. From the outside, that is exactly what happened, but as I was playing the game, there were plenty of subtleties and plenty of elements that made the situation incredibly interesting. Because yes, it was just about these two lines of Axis and Commonwealth units pushing against each other, struggling in this area, but I always had the sense that one of the two lines was very close to collapse. And many times indeed it was about managing to bring in reinforcements at the last second. So even though if you look at the thing, turn after turn, the thing didn't look much different. In reality, the units were wearing down, the number of units was decreasing. Both lines were always in danger of having part of their line separated from the main body of the line and surrounded by the opponent. That would be tragic in terms of supplies. If you are out of supplies in this game, it is tragic. It is not like in other games in which it is a matter of like, oh, I just cannot attack with the same might as I could before. No, your units will disappear into the desert, will start simply falling apart, and they will be lost forever if they stay out of supply for too long. Supplies are really key, as they should be in a game about the North African campaign. So even though, again, things looked pretty much the same, in reality a lot was going on, tension was building up, the two sides were growing more desperate, to the point that in the fall of 1941, Rommel tried a pretty desperate, a pretty brave move. I need to move the camera up close to show you what happened here. Now, as you can see, let me see, there we go. As you can see, between Tobruk and Bardia, this is the area of the main confrontation, between these two cities there are some escarpments that form just a system of almost corridors. You cannot move through those escarpments, you cannot attack those escarpments, you can do it only using these roads here. And even then, you have penalties if you are attacking through those. In any case, you can see that there's a system of corridors almost. And the Commonwealth had started building boxes, defensive boxes here and here. So things look pretty bad. So what Rommel attempted to do is to split his forces in pretty much three groups. A group blocking this bottleneck here, another group trying to hold this area here, this flank here, preventing the Commonwealth from surrounding Tobruk, which is something that they constantly tried to do. And so as there were two groups blocking these two areas here, Rommel himself and a group of elite units started pushing towards this corridor here, hitting the area of the Commonwealth defenses here, which were not too strong, and pretty much, again, desperately attempting to go to Bardia. That, if successful, would have blocked all of the supplies going to this area, which was heavily defended. The Commonwealth was, of course, putting units together here, gathering units here, trying to go towards Tobruk. It would have been, well, it was a bold attempt. Had it worked, it would have inflicted major casualties to the Commonwealth in this area. It did not work. Rommel at a certain point had to retreat here together with the group before he himself got cut off of supplies, before he himself got isolated from his main army. At that point, when the Axis line reformed here, because Rommel had to retreat, the fight was pretty much lost. At that point, the casualties of the Axis were massive. The Commonwealth kept receiving replacements, supplies. The Axis simply started retreating, and at the end, it turned out by the middle of 1942 that the situation was pretty much with the Axis defending Tobruk being effectively sieged, being supplied almost only through the sea, with units coming from the west and supplies coming from the west having a harder and harder time fighting their way through the line of Commonwealth units that at the point were almost surrounding the area entirely. In the last months of 1942, things were really desperate. The Axis units were blocked in Tobruk. Reinforcements could not make it into there anymore, and at the end, simply the Axis that had units defending Tobruk were destroyed. Tobruk was lost, and the game was lost. If the Axis had managed to retain control of Tobruk, that is to deny control of Tobruk to the Commonwealth until the end of the game, at least the game would have ended in a draw. But at the end of the game, the Commonwealth here was controlling Tobruk, Bordia, and Mersa Matruh, which are the three cities that the Commonwealth needs to control to win the game. So the game ended in a Commonwealth victory.